Hello coders, welcome to episode 150 of the How to Code Well podcast. It is September? What am I talking about? It is March the 17th yes, 150. That's an amazing amount of podcasts I've done. Today we're going to be talking about syntax and what syntax is. But before we get into any of that, before we get into any of the usual stuff, before we touch on the changelog or anything like this, there's something that I want to talk about, something that needs addressing. It's far greater than anything that I talk about on the show, and that is what's going on with the war with Russia and Ukraine, and there is. I'm lost for words. I am really quite lost for words, to be honest. I don't really know where to start. But the one word that sums it up, I suppose, in my opinion, is evil. Evil is one of those rare words that really needs caution when used. Evil is a word that shouldn't really be used lightly. It is the worst of the worst, and yet evil is one of the things that precisely sums up, in my opinion, what is going on in Ukraine due to the Russian invasion, and trying to picture the amount of people fleeing, 2 million, nearly 3 million people. What does that look like? You just can't. It's an insurmountable number of people that are going through horrendous times at the moment. And one can just think of their family and what they would do in that situation. I feel very helpless and a sinking feeling of just frustration of not being able to do anything. How can you help and support 2 million people? You know, it's a donation to 2 million people is just a drop in the ocean. And so when this happened, and I was trying to think of ways to support, I caught some tweets from Anna Felina, who has been on the show, been on the podcast as a guest, and she has Ukrainian relatives, and she is supporting a group of Ukrainians, funding and donating to the cause. And what I've done is I've donated personally to this, and I've also added a link to her donation page on every podcast, on every video on How to Code Well. So if you're struggling, as I was, to see a way of helping, then do please consider clicking on that link and putting in some funds, like, you know, your morning coffee or whatever. Just throw some money in that direction instead, because every little thing helps. And yes, I mean, there isn't really much else that I can say apart from I know that there are people who listen to the show in those areas of in that area of the world, and yeah, I am truly sorry, and I wish there was more that we could do. But I do think that as someone who has a platform, it's important to talk about these things, and also to provide an avenue of help and support. So let's crack on with the show. Let's talk about the changelog. So first of all, apologies for not doing the podcast last week. I was actually giving a talk to PHP Benelux in Belgium, and it was obviously a remote talk. And that is on my my Code with Confidence using PHPStan talk. I've given that talk to various different user groups. And I'm actually giving that talk again at the end of March at PHP Oxford. When it gets closer to that date, I will send out links and stuff if anyone wants to join. Again, that's another remote talk as well. On Tuesday, we streamed on YouTube the 7th lesson of the PHP logging course, and that was me going through the documentation and sort of rewiring up the code to match the documentation. There was holes in it. So next week we're going to get on to lesson 8, and lesson 8 is quite fun because that's talking about the nullish coalescing operator and the ternary statements and other awesome PHP goodness that we're going to be dealing with. Okay, so today it's going to be about syntax. That's the topic of this month, syntax. And last time I did this topic, we were talking about syntax sugar. And as I was talking about syntax sugar, I thought, well, hang on a minute, I haven't actually defined what syntax is, and I think that's incredibly important to start with. So I probably should have given this podcast before the syntax sugar podcast, because this is going to talk about some really the fundamentals of what syntax is. And this is something that every coder needs to be aware of and know what it is. So I think this is incredibly important, the fundamentals of what it is. Syntax can be defined as the way in which language is structured and phrased to infer meaning. So, for example, if you just don't think about the code for a minute, think about words. So just string a bunch of words together. So, an example I have here, which I'll use later, is car, walk, Pete, and shop. Now, all of those words in that particular order don't mean anything until you provide syntax around that to give it some structure, to actually give it a journey, if you will. And that was just an example of English, right? But it happens in any kind of language, including obviously a programming language. And what we're looking for are the ways that you can alter the language to provide meaning and context to the thing that it is that you're discussing, or the rules that you're defining. So they are the rules that you define. Okay, so let's talk about English for a minute. So English is actually quite a smart language. It's very forgiving language. You can say a lot of this. You can say things differently that mean the same thing, and you, being an experienced English speaker, will be able to decode, shall we say, those phrases, those words in that particular order to then give you a meaning of what it is that they're saying, and that is how communication works. However, code isn't smart. Computers aren't smart, all right? Computers can't infer the meaning. Computers aren't forgiving. They are not the same as us humans. We are far more intelligent. So going back to that phrase, those bunch of words, car, walk, Peter, and shop. So if I was to just take those 4 words and add a couple of things in between, add a couple of words in between, or add certain things, certain syntax rules, I can adjust this to do all sorts of things. So, for example, Peter walked to the car to drive to the shop. All right. So there I've added a couple of things, but walk, I've walked, so I'm doing something, and then shop is the destination, so that's where I'm going. So can you see, just by putting in a couple of things in between those words, I am actually constructing I guess one could say a program or some sort of some journey. So here's another example. So the words Peter, PHP developer. Okay, so those 3 words together, that they mean, they're not. It's not an actually sound English sentence that, you know, Peter, PHP developer. However, you can kind of infer what that means. It means that Peter, as in me, as in a person, is a PHP developer. And if I was to walk into a room, I could say, "Hi, I'm Peter, a PHP developer." So that's me greeting, introducing myself. I could also say, "Hello, Peter. Peter is my name, so therefore I'm declaring what my name is, and I am a PHP developer." So there again, I'm putting in some rules. I could also say, "Yo, my name is Peter, and I'm here to write PHP." Now, a computer won't be able to know that all of those three sentences are actually meaning the same thing. However, you know, one is more declarative than the other. Essentially, computers are stupid. They need rules to guide them through the syntax that you're writing. The rules need to be exact. They need to be concise. And if something, if the rules are wrong, if the syntax is wrong, then either the computer will do something completely wrong that it shouldn't do, or it will just break. So computers can't infer the meaning of the words. So let's say, for example, I wanted to write "Hello World." Okay, "Hello World" in any kind of programming language whatsoever. Usually, the first thing you would do is you would have a command in your programming language to say what you're going to do. In this case, we're going to write, or we could print, or we could echo. That is the thing that we're going to tell our computer to do. And then what we're going to do is provide a string of the thing that we want to print out, in this case, "Hello World." And we also need to end it with something. So a computer isn't intelligent enough to know when the sentence that you're creating or constructing, or the line of code, I should say, stops. So this is why we have semicolons. So you have semicolons in PHP because that is the end of that line, because that is the particular end of that line. And so it goes on to the next line. So the computer will go, "Okay, there's a semicolon, right, let's go down to the next line." With a natural language like English, there is things that we can do in our way of communication to work out when the line of sentence is finished. So, for example, having a pause, having full stops, having silences, and through that we can communicate with others. So the computer needs to have syntax in order for it to convert the thing that you're asking it to do into machine-readable instructions, such as ones and zeros. So, you know, machine code. And the computer reads the structure of the syntax to work out the intention. So the intention is not implied, such as, you know, in English language. The intention has to be defined. So going back to the "Hello World," you need to say print or echo or depending on the language, printf or whatever. You have to say what the intention is of that thing that you're going to do. So echo "Hello World," that is the intention. Imagine if you were to do this in real life, and every time you saw someone and you wanted to talk to them, you would start your sentence by saying "talk," because that is what you're going to do. Or imagine every time you went to walk, you would have to say "walk" before you actually did that, perform that action. That was your intention. Okay, so I've mentioned here that rules need to be concise, they need to be exact. Computers cannot infer the meaning of the words. Computers cannot determine the end of the line either. In natural language, we have many ways to infer when a sentence is finished. I've mentioned this: pauses, full stops, silences, and also we can also speak over each other, which you can't do in a program, because with a program okay. There are threads and there are all sorts of other things, but let's not overcomplicate it. Usually on a program, it starts from the top down. It goes from the first line down. So you can't usually jump, up and down, unless, for instance, you're calling a function. I know, yeah, okay, and that function appears to be at the top, but it processes it from top down. Okay. Then what you can do with syntax, and this goes into a kind of a different area, is that you can start branching off into certain different rules, certain different flows, and you can change the direction of the code. So when we talk about branching in code, we're talking about if, then, if else, if else, if else, if else statements. And these can alter the flow of the application based on the supplied values that you're inputting. So going back to the example here of car, walk, Peter, and shop, if we were to include some conditions in here to say, Peter walked to the car to go to the shop, and then we flip that and said, if shop is open, Peter walked to car to drive to shop. So now we're actually coming up with some sort of flow to say, if the shop is open, that is the thing. If that is open, then Peter is going to walk to the car in order to drive the car to the shop. And then we could have an else. So if that doesn't happen, so if the shop isn't open, then we stay home. We stay home. Or you could flip this around. You could say, if weather equals raining, Peter drives car to shop, else Peter walks to shop, right? So I don't want to get wet. So this is what branching does. It changes the flow of the application. It changes how we get from point A to point B, depending on the inputs, depending on the values of those inputs that we're supplying. So syntax, this is an incredible important thing, I think, for developers to understand what actually is syntax, and why it's so important to learn syntax, the fundamentals of syntax, before we even start playing around with the frameworks and the libraries and all the fancy trendy stuff. Knowing how to actually write PHP before actually jumping into Laravel or Symfony, knowing how to write JavaScript before going into React or Vue.js or Angular or whatever, because you need to know how the program actually reads the application, or how your application is actually reading the program, I should say. Another example where programming languages differ is Python. So Python uses indentation. PHP doesn't, JavaScript doesn't. However, you can, if you wanted to, with JavaScript and PHP, you can obviously create and follow standards that you set out. So, for instance, you could have your curly braces on another line, and all of that jazz. So that is rules that you would need to follow if you were to go down that route. They say linting, code style, code sniffing, that kind of stuff, where you detect the style of your code, the style of your syntax. But the syntax needs to be valid, and if the syntax isn't valid, then one of two things will happen. Either the rule will completely break and the computer will do something that is completely irrelevant, or something that it shouldn't be doing, or it will just break, as in it just won't run, it won't compile, it won't load, the page will refresh and it'll turn into a 500 error. That is because the syntax that you've created is wrong. This is what happens when you get the missing semicolon on the end on this particular line, or there is a comma in the wrong place, or what have you. This is all syntax that is incorrect, and the application cannot create the rules or read the rules that you are defining because you've defined them wrong. A computer will only do what you say, right? It'll only do the things that you ask it to do. So if you ask it to do the wrong thing by putting in the wrong rules, then it's going to do those things. So it's a real a computer is a real black box of just, it's not intelligent. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not intelligent. It is only going to do what you want it to do. And therefore, you as a developer need to understand the rules that you can actually apply to that particular programming language. So if you weren't aware, for instance, that you needed to have a semicolon on the end of every PHP line, or if you weren't aware that Python is has indentation, those things, they are the fundamentals. If you're not aware that you need to have curly braces within your parentheses, if you don't even know what a parentheses is, these are the syntax things that you need to be aware of. And so when someone comes to me and says, I want to learn how to code and I don't know where to start, the first thing I would say is find an introductory course of what the syntax is. After you've discovered what programming language you've chosen, right? Learn the syntax of that particular programming language, and then learn how to do branching, where you can change and alter the flow of the application using if statements and other things. And then from there you can progress and move on to more advanced stuff. But it's having the fundamentals, really the groundwork, getting the groundwork out. So that is today's talk on syntax. I hope everybody's well. Thank you ever so much for watching. This is going to go out tomorrow. I am going to edit this after this this stream, and I will push it live to Spotify and Apple iTunes, or whatever it's called now these days, on the podcast players. So if you're just watching this and you don't know, this is actually a podcast. It is live, and this goes out to the podcasts every week. I skipped last week because I was busy. I do apologize, but now it should be back on track. Also, something that I haven't mentioned is that we have Goose. Goose is our English Springer Spaniel. He is now 11 weeks old. So there is that as well. I have been pretty tired recently because I've been rushed off my feet trying to make sure that Goose is doing the things in the right places, shall we say. And so a lot of dog training and stuff, puppy training, which is cool. And the nights have been quite hideous in terms of, getting up and looking after him and making sure that he's okay and taking him out to the toilet at crazy times of the night and stuff. But yeah, if you want to find out more about the how he's doing, then do follow on Instagram. We have Murphy is the bigger brother of the Spaniels that we have, and he has an Instagram page called Adventures of Murphy Pup. I will put a link in the show notes as well, and we're using that for photos and stuff of Goose as well. So there we go. Happy coding, everybody, and I'll see you on Sunday for Twitch, where we're going to be working on probably, I'm going to say, a little bit of Cypress.js for end-to-end testing. I've got a couple of things that I want to test, which should be fun. We're either going to be doing that or we're going to be doing some PHP, because I've also got some other things that I need to work on in terms of a PHP uploader we might be building. So it depends on how I feel on that, whether we're going to do some JavaScript or whether we're going to do some PHP. But we're probably ending up writing some tests anyway. Happy coding, everyone. Take care. See you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.